I call this Altoona City Council budget work session to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll go right into the 2022 budget review and discussion, and I'll turn it over to City Manager Omar Strom.
Well, thank you, Mayor and Council. So I handed out to those that didn't already receive them on council a binder, and in that binder you'll see there's a supplementary document. I'm going to be going over that along with the my letter, the city manager's letter regarding the budget. So I'm going to focus on the letter first, which really outlines a lot of the substantive areas of the budget, and then we'll get into a little more detail with a review of the supplemental document. So the general fund budget proposed for next year is $35 million. That includes about $660,000 in expenditures that are in a contingency line item. And I'll reference that a little bit further in this letter here. One of the things that is included in the budget is the debt service refinancing and lowering of the debt service. So what that's going to consist of, and it's still being formulated in its entirety right now. We should have something, of course, on the next meeting agenda on November the 8th. But we intend to refinance the 2015, 16, 19, and 2020 city debt. The 2017 debt that we issued is not yet eligible and won't be eligible towards the end of next year. The proposed savings on next year's debt service payments is approximately $500,000. And in subsequent years, we'll still see a very minute savings compared to that $500,000. But I think it's the right move for us now, and it'll again save us that much money in next year's budget. This budget also incorporates something we've talked about in prior work sessions and so forth, which is the reconstitution of a certain portion of our workforce, specifically in the departments of the police department, the fire department, and public works department, and also the inclusion of a public works, or excuse me, community development director, and that position was eliminated, as were a number of positions last year as a kind of a precursor or in expectation of what we thought might be some really serious downturn in terms of the economy and the revenues that would be available to pay people, frankly. So this is only a partial reconstitution. It does recreate most of the jobs that were eliminated, but not all of them. And if you're following along in my letter, you'll see that this is being done not because we can. So we're not just doing it because, okay, well, this money's available and we can use it for this. The idea is that currently, right now, these activities that these people that are no longer here right now, but we hope to bring back, or the positions, I should say, not necessarily the people, are being performed. Either they're not being performed, they're only being done in part, and or some combination that would include an unsustainably high level of overtime being worked in some of our public safety departments, particularly. So that is included in this budget. There are some other personnel items, including the creation of a utility inspector. This is something that we have, for the last couple of years, looked at creating, but for one reason or another, have not done. The idea is that we have about 600 utility cuts that go on throughout the city every year. And it's really, these cuts are being managed, so to speak, through kind of a hodgepodge of people working when they can to look at them. And this position would be dedicated to overseeing and interacting with the utility companies that are actually, tearing up the street, and then the actual paving and resurfacing that's done in relation to fixing those cuts. So in order to fund the position, we expect to raise the fee that's charged to the utility companies, again, primarily the gas company and water authority, to offset the cost of the cost of maintaining them the way they should be, which would include this utility inspector, and really treating, no matter who's doing the restoration of the cuts, treating them in a uniform manner. So that's in here. There's also a proposal in here to adjust the pay scale for department heads. We have one department head that's significantly lagging in what that department head is being paid. And this budget proposes that we address that issue. It also includes some additional wage and salary costs and monies that will be used for the replacement of the outgoing IT manager, who's set to leave in about the middle of next year. And lastly, under other personnel items, would include the recreation of a part-time legislative aide in the mayor's department. I think the last time that position was in place was in 2018, I believe. Also, with regards to wages and salaries, I mean, we're in collective bargaining with all the unions that represent city employees, and so their wages and salaries in this budget are held steady. However, there is a certain amount in that contingency line item that I mentioned earlier that we have identified for potential wage increases for city employees. The next thing, and this is an important matter, related to pension funding. So in this budget, we include an additional amount for the current year and for next year to be used as a general fund contribution to the city's pensions that is really designed to, at least in the long term, more adequately fund those pensions. So please be aware of that. Bottom line, I guess, is that there are no tax increases. So there's no tax increase in this budget. But I just want to point out that going forward in out years, we're almost going to have to do something that would either increase revenues, decrease costs, reduce services, or some combination of that. But that's not a combination, or that's not a conversation for today. It's just pointing to the future, given all that we know about the costs of bringing local government to this municipality. And ultimately, I'm recommending that you approve this this budget. That's the last item in the letter. Any questions about that before I get into a more thorough review?
Can I ask you
Sure.
on the personnel side?
Yes.
Well, first of all, Victor, I hope that you know that you were retiring. I hope that wasn't a surprise when Omar said that. So, okay. Didn't want that to be the happy retirement and you didn't know you were retiring. But seriously, though, about the inspector for the utility cuts.
Yes.
I mean, it's 600 a year, and if you subtract that weekends and holidays and vacation, that's about, averages about 3 a day. I mean, so is that really a full-time position? And maybe I don't understand enough about the aspects of that.
Well, just the preparation, the management of it when it's actually happening, inspecting and then re-inspecting, we feel that it more than justifies the need for an additional employee.
So they would handle the administrative side of that as well, then, with dealing with the application and the notification from the utility companies and coordinate all that, is that?
Yeah, so my understanding, and again, Nate, you can jump in if you feel the need, but this person would oversee the entire process, from beginning to end on every street cut.
So, since I came on board, it seems as though we have never been able to get ahead in this, I guess, wheelhouse. We have cuts. You guys fund road resurfacing every year for us. We have an ordinance that allows us to capitalize, I guess, or at least get our fair share of resurfacing for these projects that are around town. And there's the cut aspect of the position where, we have 600 a year, but you all have probably driven around and have seen the 5 to 7 long line jobs I see in neighborhoods all the time. And so we also have the ability to assess an inspector fee to help sort of protect our interest that we don't have right now. So, the complaints that come in of people not being able to get through their neighborhood because they have traffic set up, and also just, stockpiles of materials everywhere. We're really hoping to kind of clean up that act, I guess, for just lack of not having anybody else to do it right now. So, and we also have an ordinance that, so they go through, a lot of times right now, it's 6 months, 8 months till we get back through an area to see, where, somebody might have been there and they have a cut on a brand new road, and we don't know who it is or what that position may be. There's some things depending on, how this morphs out. If we have the ability to add anything else, I'd like to put the longer term paving, like a 1 to 5 year cycle, in this person's hand too, so we can project a better, I guess, resurfacing plan. Also maybe, tree complaints or something along those lines, anything in the right of way, driveways, things that are just getting overlooked, not overlooked, but just there isn't enough staff to really dedicate to watch that.
I know you guys are spread thin, so I just, again, was just trying to wrap my head around. So, and some of those cuts are it's a much bigger project than just, it's the whole streets as they replace a gas line or a sewer line or something like that, so, okay.
Yeah,
Thank
the
you.
tough part of that is, well, not necessarily the tough part, because we communicate well with the utilities back and forth, but it takes a lot of time. Even though it may seem like 2 or 3 cuts a day, you're dealing with every subsurface utility at each cut.
The one thing we're also finding out, I think, is that as these utility companies change hands or they get bought out by other people, every player changes, and we're just chasing our tail trying to figure out who to even talk to most days anymore, it seems as though. And then we also have the ability to work with these folks, and if they're doing a long line project somewhere in town, we can get them to repave half the road for us because we have that in our ordinance, or there's penalties if they come in, because even the roads we just got done paving this year, there was already cuts in some of these roads, and some of them are emergencies. A lot of them are. They just happen. We have an old infrastructure, but it does get frustrating that a resident waits 26 years to get a road repaved, and two weeks later there's a utility cut in again. So we're hoping to sort of get a better handle on that.
That's a good point too, because PA1 call, even though they're updating the way they do the communication process, like you said, when they get bought out, you got to establish those relationships with each utility, because sometimes the one calls, the way they work, sometimes they don't go to the local office, they go to a home office in Pittsburgh or Johnstown or wherever that tends to be. And so sometimes people from Altoona may never even see that, and so if you don't know who's doing what, they're hard to track down.
Omar, thanks for the presentation. So it appears that we're expecting to have about $808,000 come out, more come out of the general fund for pension contributions next year. So that's about a 15% increase from what we're used to.
Yeah,
From
so there's, we have to find a way to address the, you know, unfunded liabilities, going forward, and this will be a step in the right direction.
Thank you.
Okay, so, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's a supplementary document here. The actual budget itself, aside from the manager's letter and the summary of revenues and expenditures, the actual document and the notes associated with it is 59 pages. This supplementary document is 9 pages, and it really is just kind of highlighted items for those revenue and expenditure line items that have the biggest discrepancy between what was budgeted this year and what we project to be budgeted for next year. So they're color-coded in the document that I've given you. It looks like a Christmas tree in that it's red and green, but the idea is the green are those items that are higher, be they revenues or expenditures in the 2022 budget, and the red ones are items that we budget to be lower than the amount budgeted in this year 2021's budget. So looking on the revenue side first, you see that taxes, per capita tax, we expect that to be down somewhat from last year. The other items I have highlighted under other taxes include real estate tax, transfer tax, mercantile tax, business privilege tax, and local services tax. We budget that they're going to be somewhat higher than they were in the current year. And again, in the current year, we took a kind of a dim approach to what was going to happen as a result of the pandemic.
Well, I
You know?
think we had to. This is all, just kind of for our friends in the media. This is all pre the incoming administration cranking out the money presses once again for, activity. I mean, every municipality in the country in some form is getting some kind of money. This is all pre this. So we were not sure where to anticipate some of our largest revenue sources, which we felt for sure that EIT would have taken the biggest plunge. And what we're forecasting here sure doesn't appear, it appears we didn't miss a beat.
Yeah, I would say it was down slightly compared to the prior couple of years. If you see in the budget, we look at actual activity for 2019 and 2020. And we budget really for that to return in line with those years. And that's, again, these numbers in terms of revenues particularly are conservative numbers. So we're not budgeting like, okay, well, we might get, $500,000 more and then putting that number in our budget. I think that's
So
irresponsible, so.
how do we allocate, so like earned income tax is paid, I think I pay mine at the normal tax filing deadline, like in April of next year, like I pay a quarterly. So
Yeah.
when we receive that revenue, is it booked then, or how do we handle the allocation of that? Okay, all right. Thank you.
Then if we move into the next category, revenues, which is licenses and permits, I have, they're all green there. So rental license fees, business privilege licenses, street opening permits, building permits, mechanical code permits, and property maintenance reinspection fees. They all of them are higher than what we had budgeted for 2021. Some of them a little more significantly than others. The next category of revenue is charges for service. Most of those you'll see are in green as well. The most significant one would be the Water Authority agreement payment, which is, a schedule of the lease payment from the Water Authority for the city's assets. The next category of revenues is fines and forfeits, and you'll see, there's two line items I have highlighted here. One's red, one's green. Traffic and criminal fines. We had budgeted $100,000 for that last year. It really doesn't fall in line with history, the prior couple of years. So we're just kind of bringing it back down to where we would think that it probably will end up at $80,000. And property maintenance violations, we would expect those to jump up as well, because we have unfortunately, a lot of properties that are in violation of the property maintenance code. So that's something we unfortunately don't think it's going to go away. Next section of revenues is intergovernmental state revenues. So these include state aid for the city's pensions. We expect that's going to go down a little bit compared to where it was in 2021. It went down this year. What we received this year was not what we budgeted. It was about about $70,000 less, I believe. One of the increased areas under intergovernmental state revenue is going to be money we anticipate to receive for reimbursement of the people we send to the police training academy. So we anticipate that we're going to be sending quite a few folks off to be trained in the coming year. And so that reimbursement, we anticipate that to be higher than what we had anticipated last year.
So this budget includes the new officers getting our numbers back up to where they should be.
Right, and as an offset of that, we pay that, and then the state will reimburse us a
50%.
majority of that, I believe. I'm not sure, it's more than 50, I believe.
The tuition is 50%, and then there's a formula that we just did this year for the first time, to my knowledge, for the two we sent in March that actually reimburses a portion of their salary while they're there.
Okay.
So
Nice.
for these two that we did in March, I submitted through the state for their 50% of their tuition and a portion of their salary. So that's what we factored in for anyone we send next year. That's our hopes.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks. That's great
At
news.
one time, they used to pay all of the tuition, right? Yeah, so then we ended up having that changed, and we had to pick up half of that cost, so.
Then to round out the revenues on the second page of your document, just looking at insurance claim proceeds that the proceeds we get for claims against damaged property and so forth, we anticipate that to come back up more in line with history, which was significantly higher than what we had budgeted for this year. And the other item to really look at there is the transfer in from our Act 205 fund. That's going to go down slightly, and transfer in from a grant match fund. We actually have grants out there. If you recall, we created a grant match fund a while back. We haven't been really successful on grants to use that match, but looks like we anticipate that'll be the case next year. So we'll be transferring in some revenue or some money from that particular fund. Any questions about revenues that I've highlighted before I move on to expenditures?
Omar, on the intergovernmental side,
Yeah.
we show state aid pension contribution to be down 1.7 million, but is that what that's what you're projecting for 2022? I'm sorry, I got my lines confused. Okay, that makes sense. Never mind, answer my own question. When you have a chance, could you provide the unfunded liabilities? When do we have to do the next Act 205 filing?
So they should be finalizing that here. I just talked to our non-uniformed actuary representative this afternoon. They're gonna provide us with some information by the end of next week, so we'll be finalizing that in the not too distant future.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to expenditures then. Just try to hit the highlights here. First item there on page 3 is again, we talked about this earlier, the recreation of the part-time staff in the mayor's office. In the manager's department, there are some costs there associated with the manager and the retirement contribution that are much lower than they were last year. Again, a restructuring in the finance department that really causes us some savings in terms of the actual expenditures that we anticipate next year compared to 2021. Moving on to legal services, you'll see that there are some costs there that we don't anticipate to recur, or I should say we anticipate them to be lower in the coming year, that being Special Labor Council. I'm working hard to be diligent and thoughtful about picking up the phone and calling the attorney about things. There's always something, but a lot of that we put in for contract negotiations and potential arbitration, and hopefully the actual bottom line cost of that won't be what we anticipated last year. Moving on to the next page, under the city clerk's department, we expect that the codification costs to update that's going to be lower than what we budgeted. Under human resources, again, we have a little bit of a change there. We're going to, believe it or not, I know you're probably guessing, or a little bit of quandary about the human resources director position. We will fill that position. That's budgeted here. We do anticipate that unemployment comp costs. So we're self-insured for unemployment compensation and workers' compensation for that matter. But we had budgeted a very large amount of money last year for unemployment, and we don't anticipate that's gonna be the case for this year or next year. We do have an increase in cost for the recruitment of uniformed employees. That's going to be an ongoing thing with the police officers, and next year we'll be doing the firefighters as well. And workers' comp, we believe that's going to be down a little bit compared to what we budgeted this year as well. Down towards the bottom of the page, under Department 407, under Information Technology, you'll see the additional costs we have associated with the IT manager's line item and the consultant that we use, as well as some expanding costs in terms of the support contracts that we have and the software support contracts that we have. Those items are going up, and they're highlighted here. If you turn over to page 5, this is where we get into the public safety aspect. Under the police department, of course, professional staff, that's going to be, police officers. We talked about adding some folks back into that, and the associated costs of the training that's in there. One thing to point out is that we anticipate that the longevity salary costs are lower, and that just is a sign that we have a much younger workforce, so they're not eligible for, we're not being paid at the higher rate for longevity, so that's gonna go down. In the fire department, excuse me, again, professional staff gonna be up. Vehicle repairs, those costs, they just keep climbing, and we anticipate that to happen next year. And also the hazmat planning committee is going to go up slightly. Under code enforcement, codes and inspections, the director's position, the clerical, we added back in a clerical position into that department, so that's going to be, that shows up there. But it does show a reduction in what we're paying for contracted services through the middle department inspection agency. So those costs have been significantly limited by the hiring of a building inspector. And for the most part, the middle department inspection agency is only doing plan reviews. Is that correct, Rebecca? Yeah. Whereas before, they were doing plan reviews and all of our inspections. So if you look at 2019 and 2020, you see that number's more than double what we anticipate to be paid this year and next year. Turning the page, we had eliminated a position under emergency management. That's at the top of the page. Under public works, salaries for full-time staff, that would include the addition of the utility inspector and the recreation of the engineering technician position. Down the page a little bit further under fleet maintenance, this is something that should be not a surprise to anybody. Fuel for vehicles, we anticipate that to be up significantly because, frankly, fuel is going up and there seems to be no end in sight every time you go past the gas station or Sheets or whatever it might be. It seems like there's something going up, and the price is going up. Down at the bottom of the page under Public Works, Highways, and Streets, again, full-time staff, overtime up slightly, and materials related to road cuts and street cuts, that is up as well. Turning over to page 7. Under stormwater management, I think there was this is really more of a correction than it's certainly not the addition of a person in that section of the Public Works Department, but really there's 3 people in that section and not 2, and there were only 2 budgeted there last year. We had someone retire and then recreated a position that was paid under that section. Middle of the page, you see green line there. That is the CBRC contribution. So Mike Hofer had sent me a letter requesting an additional $50,000 as the city's contribution to the CBRC, and that is included here. Below that, under the Planning and Community Development Department, recreation of a Community Development Director, that's green. Full-time staff, that's definitely red because we don't have as many positions and we don't intend to have as many positions in that department as we did. And of course, some associated costs and health insurance, for example, are way down because we have fewer employees in that department. Turning over to page 8, lots of red at the top of the page. That would be all the debt service that we intend to refinance and pay off. So really all of that goes away. And you see that the 2021 debt service is the green, and that's going to be the new amount that we expect to pay. I don't know the breakdown of that between principal and interest, but you can expect that the interest is going to be much higher than the principal in the first year of a repayment. So, cyber insurance costs at the bottom of the page, they went up significantly. We marketed it. We looked at the market and several other carriers than what we currently have. None of them were any better than our current carrier. But the market is such that because of so many claims, the cost of providing that insurance is higher, and the limits on what the payment would be were down as well. So that's just a function of the world we're living in and the cyber attacks that are kind of on an ongoing basis. And then on the last page here, I just highlighted in green the contingency line item that I mentioned earlier, and the fact that it is increasing from where it was last year. So one little, on the next page, it really doesn't, it's not the budget, but it's a kind of a comparison of salary and earnings for the various department directors. And you can see that my recommendation would just kind of move that person, the position into line with the other directors that we have and anticipate to have in the coming year. So that really wraps up my presentation of the budget. There's obviously a lot more in the budget in 59 pages than there is in this high-level overview of 9 pages. If you have any questions, would like me to review anything more in detail, please let me know. And, the department directors are here to speak maybe more significantly and in more detail than I can about any particular thing. But I just want to throw that open to you.
This is a small thing, but the rec commission increase. And Jesse, maybe you're a better person to direct this to, but with that increase, I mean, in theory, could we not take that increase out for the next 3 years from the ARPA money if it was to be earmarked for improvements? Or
I'm not sure. I mean, we have not been briefed on the budget situation yet involving the CBRC. My last communication with the executive director was that they were about 75% of the way projecting next year's budget. We don't meet until November. But I know that kind of some soft numbers, that it gives the appearance that they're going to be off a good bit.
Okay, but clearly in the rec commission's budget, there has to be money for playground rehabilitation or physical things like that.
Some kind of capital improvement program.
Yeah, I mean, I just wonder if our increase could be targeted towards that so that it would qualify for the ARPA monies for the next 3 years.
Well, and
I mean, is that a possibility? I mean, again, it's a small amount, but all these things do start to add up.
No, that's a good idea.
yeah, and there's still a bit of some gray area here, because apparently this interim final rule that has been amended a couple of times still is not final at this point, and it might be finalized by the end of the month, or they may do an extension. And recreation is still kind of an area that I know that they got some frequently asked questions back. Essentially, a lot of communities across the country are saying we're having difficulty spending the money on this category, and they're looking for guidance from the Treasury. So my understanding is, I mean, we don't have a set direction as far as recreation is concerned yet, and that seemed to be one of the more concerning areas that people were questioning. So I think it's a good idea, but I think kind of at this juncture, maybe holding off on any kind of real discussions regarding recreation might be a good thing till we see where the final rules fall on
Well,
this
but we're
thing.
going to have a adopted budget here.
True.
So, I mean, I think it'd be worth running by to say, you know, could that money be designated for those physical types of needs so that it would, I mean, unless Omar, you're gonna tell me that that money wouldn't qualify.
No, I actually think it would, but we make, you know, the history is we make a general contribution, and that's just used as it's needed. I don't see why we couldn't specify if they're gonna spend the money on A, B, C that would qualify, or, you know, may well qualify under the American Rescue Plan Act, that we couldn't say, well, you know, spend our extra $50,000 on that. I don't see why that would be a problem. I think Mike Hofer just, you know, needs the money to keep the play, you know, keep
Absolutely,
going.
absolutely. But I'm saying that that could be part of those ARPA monies. And the reality is they may be getting more for other
Yeah,
things till we
right.
make some decisions. But I think that would take care of them, you know, a certain amount of it for the next couple of years. And certainly they're gonna have maintenance needs or upgrades. So I just think it's an easier way to do it than taking it out of the general fund.
I'll look into it. As I say, just sitting here, you know, for discussion purposes, I think it could be targeted like that. And I could talk to Mike and see what he thinks, and I can look at the regulations and kind of follow up on what Jesse's saying, as well.
Going forward then with the ARPA money, you know, you have accounted for here the ability to restore some positions that had been eliminated. So going forward, when we designate projects that we're going to undertake, which could start sometime early next year, will we have to include that in our budget? And how will that work? What's the mechanics on that?
So the idea in my mind, for tracking purposes, we're gonna pay, you know, so we hire, you know, 5 police officers, 2 firefighters, we're gonna track them separately, and then we're gonna, you know, every month, certainly every quarter, because we have to, you know, report every quarter, we're gonna pull in the costs of those folks in terms of their wages and benefits out of the ARPA funds into the general fund.
Okay.
Omar, you had mentioned, I'm just curious, talking here about compensation. When's the last time the city, and I'm treading carefully here, but when's the last time the city had a pay study, if ever?
Well before my time, and I'm really not sure they've ever had it. And I think at least in part, the reason is that we, you know, the city is so heavily unionized, that, you know, well over 90% of our employees are union employees. So their wages and benefits are part of the bargaining agreements.
Right.
We only right now have 17 employees that are not members, or not represented, I should say, not represented by a union. You know, we have 2 vacant positions, the HR director, the community development director. So that's only 19. During the most recent reduction in force that occurred at the beginning of the year, we lost a number of non-represented people.
Right. I guess I asked because I know that we advertised at one point for a finance director, and I believe we advertised at 100,000.
Yes.
And I don't think that's the first time that position's been advertised, with some form of, you know, compensation that we had applicants kind of from all over, you know, with a variety of different backgrounds, from, you know, just beginning to PhDs. And I just think it's kind of hard for us to get really a gauge as far as what's the market rate for an HR director, a finance director. I was just curious. Again, I'm not per se advocating for a study to be done, and I'm very cautious on that, particularly when it comes to hiring consultants for those purposes, so I appreciate your info.
No, I don't think it's a bad idea at all. It's not in the budget because, you know, there just seems to be a lot of other moving parts in here. But I wouldn't be opposed if the council so directs to go out and try to find a consultant that can put something together for all the non-represented folks. I don't think that's a bad idea at all. And if you so choose, we will include that in this budget. Or I should say, in our budget for introduction.
Are you talking about something then that would be, here's a position, here's the duties of the position, here's the salary range?
Yeah, so, I know, I saw some preliminary information. We had a money in the 2020 budget, I believe it
Yep.
was, for such a study, and there were some initial steps taken to put that together. And yeah, that's what you do. You do a survey, or the person would do a survey, the consultant would do a survey of municipalities or similarly situated organizations, and you compare not just titles, but also the duties. Yeah, you really have to look at the job descriptions.
And make
to-
sure that they're not, have other responsibilities that don't align with the title and the position here, so.
Yeah,
And I think
Okay.
I think that was as we were coming on to council, I think that was part of Peter Marshall's budget as we were
Yes.
coming into 2020. I think he allocated 20,000.
14.
14 or 20,000. I mean, I think it'd be worth us considering that headed that direction. The job market has become very different, obviously, over the last 20 months. But just in general, I mean, a lot of these career positions are positions that historically haven't had a lot of turnover. But I would say today's work environment has become very different, where the average person's going to change jobs way more frequently than they did over the last 20 or 30 years. So I think we need to make sure that we're in the right ballpark on these.
If council's in agreement with that, I'll move forward on that, with that, and include it in our budget for introduction.
Do you have anything else that you wanted to go over tonight, Omar, regarding this?
I do not, but I do want to make sure that we answer any questions you might have, or discuss any of the topics that I brought up, or any other items that you would like to discuss that are budget related. And of course, if you have questions after we leave, or some things we want to talk about, this will be on the agenda for our work session next Monday too. That's been identified as.
And
I don't-
oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry,
Go
go
ahead. Well, you would need to know about the salary study and whatever else at the work session next week, I'm thinking, because we have to introduce this first meeting in November, well, the only meeting in November, and finalize in December, first Monday in December, I believe it is.
Yeah, so bear that in mind, and when you come to the work session next week, that, you know, whatever changes we want to make here, we probably want to do that then, if possible, and finalize that.
I mean, but does the $7,000 for a salary study need to be in the budget, or could that not be authorized by council and just taken out of contingency,
I don't know.
Yes, it could be.
Yeah.
It could definitely.
rather than have a separate line item for us? Because you'll know the cost. Somebody will say it's gonna take so much money to do it.
My guess is if it was $14,000 2 years ago, it's
60 now.
gonna be more than, well, hopefully not that much, but.
I don't have any questions. I just want to commend you and all the department heads on working to put this budget together. I know there was a lot of obstacles and challenges you had to navigate through with this year and with everything regarding trying to work in reconstituting the workforce. So I know there was a lot of puzzle pieces that you had to fit in while also making this budget. So good job, everybody.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'll echo those comments. I'm sure the budget process creates some level of anxiety for all the department heads, and especially after everything we went through for the preparation of the 2021 budget. So just appreciate everyone's work and your commitment to the city. So thank you.
Yeah, I certainly feel a lot better now than I did at the beginning of the year. We didn't know what was coming up. You guys did a really good job.
Anybody have any other questions? Comments? No? Okay. We'll open the floor now for public comment. If anybody would like to address council regarding the proposed 2022 budget that we just discussed tonight, you may do so by dialing the number on the screen. Is Bill still on there? Okay, we'll close the floor for public comment, and we will now take questions from the media regarding the budget. Bill, are you on?
Yeah, he might have to unmute.
He has to unmute himself.
Yeah.
Bill, could you unmute yourself?
Perhaps he's on a 30-day leave of absence as well.
It's possible. Bill, are you there?
Maybe he's in the bathroom.
Bill, you need to press star and 3 in order to speak.
Probably down to 50 about now.
Well, since Bill can't figure it out, Courtney, do you have any media questions that you'd like to ask?
Bill.
Or do you want to
Victor,
wait
is
till
it
after the meeting?
3152?
Okay.
It's Bill.
He has everyone's cell phone number.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'll
Yeah.
call.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. This meeting is adjourned.